Next on Max TV, we take a look at the return of Floyd Mayweather against Juan Manuel Marquez. We review ShoBox, and we have news and notes coming up on the next round. And welcome to the next round, brought to you by Everlast Worldwide. Steve Kim joined us always by Gabriel Montoya, a jam-packed show. Boxing begins once again. It is numero uno from the MGM Grand in Las Vegas. It's the return of Floyd Money Mayweather taking on Juan Manuel Marquez. On the undercard for the WBA featherweight title, it's the rematch. Chris John takes on Rocky Juarez. And lightweights, meeting at the crossroads, Michael Katsidis takes on Vicente Escobedo. The question is very simple, Gabe. If you take a look at Mayweather Marquez, is this another handpicked foe from Floyd Mayweather, or is this really a legitimate pound-for-pound matchup?
It's kind of somewhere in between. You know, it's hard to discount a guy like Marquez. He's a hell of a technician, one of the most skilled boxers and intelligent boxers we've seen in years. He's had an ability to adapt to what his opponent's doing, not just, round to round, but in the middle of rounds. But at the same time, he looked kind of maxed out to me at 135 pounds. While he did have great wins over, Juan Diaz, knocking him out, a guy who had never been stopped, and Joel Casamayor, who had never been stopped also, he struggled in that Casamayor fight. Casamayor laid traps for him. He's another counterpuncher, kind of not similar to Mayweather in terms of style, but maybe in terms of mentality. And it took everything that Marquez had to get him out of there, and his face was pretty marked up by the end of that fight. Now you add on 12 pounds, or however many pounds are supposed to weigh for this welterweight bout, and it's hard to pick Marquez in this fight, and hard not to think of him as a hand-picked opponent. I mean, I guess the surest way to say that, is Marquez hand-picked? It's like, well, Mayweather did sign to take the fight.
And we've always believed that Mayweather, for a great a fighter as he is, he's a much better manager. And just taking a look at Marquez physically in 24/7, he looks a little bit heavy, a little bit waterlogged, and a little bit bloated. I think his best bet is to come in closer to lightweight than actual welterweight. I think he's better off coming in at 36, 37, 38, rather than 42, 43, or 45, or whatever the weight limit is. Here's the thing about Floyd Mayweather. Let's go down the list here, Gabe. He's younger, right?
Yeah.
He's faster, right?
Yeah.
He's quicker, right?
Yep.
A couple of years ago, he was fighting as high as 154, while Marquez was still at 130. I think those, to me, are the intangibles. I think, to me, this fight goes rounds and this fight goes to distance. That in itself is a victory, along with the $3.5 million that Juan Manuel Marquez is slated to earn. I like Mayweather in this fight. I think he's going to win this fight quite handily. I think the question is, can he stop Juan Manuel Marquez? To me, that is the great intrigue of numero uno.
I think it kind of depends on what Floyd decides to do in this fight. With a guy like Marquez's skills, usually you do have to couple it with something else when you're fighting somebody like a Mayweather, who's fast, who's also technically sound, is the bigger man. You have to couple it with either speed or power or strength. And Marquez doesn't bring that to the table. He's the smaller guy. He's the older guy. He's got a lot more miles on him. I think the legs are going to be weak. Like you said, his upper body looks huge. I haven't really seen much of him moving around and sparring too much. I just think if Mayweather comes in, how I see the fight going is Mayweather comes in, lets Marquez kind of be aggressive early in the first 4 rounds, gauges him, figures out the trajectories of the angles he needs to use, and then he starts to put it on him in the middle rounds. And if he's there to be stopped, I think that Mayweather's going to come and try to do that. I mean, I just don't see how Marquez shores up all the deficiencies he's got here. I mean, he could drink a gallon of King Kong's urine, and I don't think it's going to help.
Gabe, here's the thing stylistically. We have 2 counterpunchers. And usually that's a very bad mix, because it's almost like you throw a punch, no, you throw a punch, no, you throw a punch, you throw a punch, and nobody throws a punch, and both guys are kind of staring at each other for 3-4 rounds at a time. Now, I think there's pressure on Floyd Mayweather here, not to just win, because he's always won. He's undefeated. The question about Floyd Mayweather is, can he be entertaining and can he be fun? And this fight is not doing that well at the box office, no matter what anyone's telling you. It's not going to do great pay-per-view numbers. And I think that what Floyd Mayweather is really doing is setting the stage for negotiating leverage against the winner of Pacquiao-Cotto, who are bona fide draws. So I think it's incumbent upon Floyd Mayweather to take on a guy like Juan Manuel Marquez, perhaps 2 weight divisions above his best, not just eke by Juan Manuel Marquez
No.
like Manny Pacquiao did, but I think he has to hammer and dominate him.
I agree. You know, he's got to make a statement here. I mean, because he's, like you said, he's not the bigger draw. He's certainly a big name in the sport, one of the biggest names in the sport. But it doesn't really show in ticket sales. It doesn't really show in pay-per-views when he's on his own, or when he's the A side of a fight like this. He's got to hammer out Marquez. He's got to do what everybody thinks he can't, which is stop him and be exciting. And I think. Yeah, they're both counterpunchers, but in a situation like this where Mayweather's coming in being the bigger guy, probably feels that Marquez can't hurt him. I mean, Marquez is a guy that can get the knockouts, but he's not like a one-punch knockout guy. He's got to kind of hit you repeatedly to set it up. He's got to land the harder shots like he did against Juan Diaz, landing body shots and kind of setting up the big counterpunch in order to get you out of there. And I don't think Mayweather's going to have to worry about that. And so I think he can afford to be a little bit aggressive. I think this fight comes down to Mayweather can make a few mistakes and still come out on top. And Marquez is going to have to pitch a shutout.
In defense of Marquez, in his later days here, as he winds up the prime of his career, he walks into the sunset of what's been a Hall of Fame run. As his legs have shown some wear and tear, he's become a more exciting fighter. Mm-hmm. But it's going to be an absolute indictment of Floyd Mayweather if he does not play the aggressor in this particular fight. You're talking about a guy who's much naturally smaller, and it wasn't that long ago you were fighting at junior middleweight while this guy was at 130. Right. If he actually goes out there and plays four corners the last half of the fight, I think, to me, that is a blight on the record of Floyd Mayweather.
Yeah.
And another thing that's interesting about this fight is I want to see just how well it does at the box office, because everyone had trumpeted the return of Floyd Mayweather as being the face of boxing. They tried to do 24/7, but I have to tell you, the best marketing in the world is not 24/7, it's exciting fights. And I want to see, does the general public, and does even the Latin crowd, which supports boxing en masse, do they really care about this fight that is on Mexican Independence Day weekend? Because if this fight does not do 500,000 buys, I think that says it all about the popularity, not just of Marquez, but really of Floyd Mayweather.
Yeah, really just talking to my casual fight fan friends, they're all watching UFC 103 this weekend. And
really?
They're not excited about this fight at all. Even a lot of the guys that tell me how great Mayweather is and will argue with me about his record and this and that, they're not watching the fight. So I'm really curious to see how the pay-per-view numbers do.
Well, the one thing we've noticed about Mayweather fans, they are the vocal minority who never actually buys fights or never actually goes to fights. But I will say this in defense of Mayweather Promotions and Golden Boy. I think they put together a hell of a card, top to bottom, even with Zab Judah pulling out for whatever mysterious reason. You take a look at these other two undercard fights, certainly not Butterbean, Mia St. John, or Yuri Borman. We have Chris John against Rocky Juarez, Michael Katsidis against Vicente Escobedo. I'll say this, Gabe, if this fight was a doubleheader on Boxing After Dark, I think me and you would both be saying what an anticipated telecast we would have on HBO.
I can't wait for these fights. These two are really, really exciting fights. They're styles and examples of contrast here. You got the Chris John and Rocky Juarez fight, which is your classic boxer against your come-forward slugger. I talked to Juarez yesterday, and he seems, actually a couple days ago, he seems very excited about the fight. He was let down emotionally after the fight was postponed, but it seemed to fuel his fire just a little bit more. This is his last shot, he feels, at getting a title, and his best shot at getting a title. And I think he's going to come forward, and he says he wouldn't reveal what his game plan was or what his secret weapon was going to be, but that he expected to show us something a little bit different and get his left hook more involved and a little bit earlier. And he says he needs the knockout to get the win.
Hold on, Gabe. It's no secret what he needs to do. Let your hands go, get him off a layaway, and be busy and active and close the distance with the gap. I think it's going to be another close competitive fight.
Yeah.
I'm not a big fan of Chris John's style. To me, that is amateur boxing. I thought Rocky Juarez won the first fight based on hard professional punching. Yeah. But Chris John's going to be Chris John. He's a sturdy guy. He boxes well from the outside. He's got a very educated left hand. And he does have some advantages physically over Rocky Juarez. In another close competitive battle, I don't know who wins this fight. My heart says Rocky Juarez. My mind says Chris John, and that's the great thing about this fight. I think it really is another nip and tuck battle.
I'm going to go Chris John. I'm going to take Chris John in this. I think, when you look at a rematch, you go, who could physically do better? And I think, John has all the attributes to maybe sit down on his punches a little more and not be so pity-pat. I mean, we could get a rematch of Paulie Malignaggi versus Juan Diaz, in a sense, the one guy that's just kind of touching and moving. But I think John has a little bit of power. I think he knows where his mistakes were. And I think, like Juarez, he's going to look to be a little more solid in his outing. And I just pick him by decision.
Gabe, if Rocky Juarez does not win this last opportunity at a title, he is officially the Buffalo Bills of the 1980s. He's good enough to win the AFC Championship game. He's good enough to go to the Super Bowl, but he always goes just a little bit wide right when it's all said and done. And that's a shame because he's a pretty good fighter.
Yeah.
Katsidis Escobedo, I think, is the fight for relevancy. I tell you what, I was there in Austin, Texas, a couple of months ago when they both fought. They both showed some of their flaws. They both showed some of their strengths. I tell you what, I like the physical strength and the overall aggressiveness of Michael Katsidis to overwhelm Vicente Escobedo.
I feel the same way. I like him late. He's a guy that can make a lot of mistakes. He can eat some punches, but he's always going to be right there. And I don't think Escobedo is the kind of puncher that's going to get his respect early and keep it throughout the fight. I don't think he's going to hurt Katsidis at all. He may cut him. Katsidis does have a tendency to do that, and that might get get the stoppage. But I really like Katsidis' physical style. I think he's a stronger guy, and he's going to be there all night. And Escobedo tends to wilt late. And so I think those two things are going to equal a Katsidis either late stoppage or a decision.
Gabe, rounding out this card will be a fight between Orlando Cruz and Cornelius Locke, which, again, I don't think there's much they could have done with Zab Judah pulling out so late. But I think top to bottom, I think this is a very good night of boxing.
Yeah.
And I'll say this, the one thing the advantage the UFC has, because of their pay scale and the fact that everything's in-house, the one thing casual fans of both sports will say is that the UFC/MMA, top to bottom, put on better undercards. Well, I think this is the one case, and I think you have to give kudos to Richard Schaefer, to Eric Gomez, to Floyd Mayweather and his crew. They have put together a very representative night of boxing from beginning to end.
Yeah, you got all different manners of styles. You've got competitive fights, you've got crossroad fights, you've got title fights. It's one of the best undercards in years. I'm looking forward to the whole card, top to bottom.
And another factor we did not discuss is the rust of Floyd Mayweather. You never know what can happen when guys take off that long. And the one thing that I think that Marquez is a master of is timing. He uses your own energy against you, and you never know. Maybe Floyd Mayweather spent one too many nights at a strip club buying Cristal for everybody. And the one thing I've always liked about Marquez, even in his most cautious days, when you hit him, you angered him. He's never been afraid to fight. So even if he goes down, he will go down swinging. So I think if that happens, we might have an entertaining night.
I think so. If Mayweather's a little more aggressive than usual, Marquez is going to be right there to deal with him. And the more Floyd presses, the more chances that counterpunching Marquez has to land a good shot. I mean, he could land a shot to the body. I mean, this is as scientific a guy as you can get. And really, we're going to get to see is, Nacho Beristain against Roger Mayweather Sr. These guys, the Mayweathers talk about being the greatest trainers in the world. I tend to think they just have one of the best fighters we've seen in many, many years. It's going to be interesting to see the adjustments and counter-adjustments throughout the fight.
So there it is, numero uno from the MGM Grand in Las Vegas this Saturday night. We come back, round number 2, brought to you by Everlast. We come back, we take a look at Showbox. And we are back on the next round, brought to you by Everlast. Steve, Kim, Gabe Montoya talking boxing. This Saturday, there was a special edition of Showbox, a split-site doubleheader, a prelude to Showtime's Super 6 World Boxing Classic. Mikhail Kessler with a TK on 4 over Guzmir Perdomo, while Andre Ward takes care of Shelby Pudwell in 3. Now they meet at the Oracle in Oakland, California. Kessler and Ward. Gabe, I've said this a million times before, one of my favorite cliches, they did the Chris Rock. They fed their kids, they kept their jobs, they stayed out of the jail. In other words, they did what they were supposed to in blowing out overmatched foes.
Yeah, this kind of, these tune-ups went exactly as I thought they would. Perdomo had an interesting style. He was kind of a cagey guy. He would move around a lot. He'd shoot from the outside, land that long left hand. And Kessler, he looked good, man. He took his time. He looked very sharp. That jab and right hand, and then he had a sneaky hook off the jab. He looked as good as I thought he would. He took about as much time to get his guy out of there as I thought he would. It almost seemed like he was going to go distance for a while, but, like a true professional, once he had his guy a little bit tired, he stepped on the gas a little bit and then created an opening for himself, hurt the guy, and got him out of there. It was nice.
Yeah, the thing about Mikhail Kessler that I like is there's a certain simplicity to what he does. Very straight, jab, very straight right hand. It's the 1-2. There's not a lot of frills, not a lot of special effects, as Floyd Mayweather would say, but he is so sound technically that time and time again, you're going to have to be perfect, and you cannot make a lot of mistakes. And the one thing about Mikkel Kessler, very strong physically. He's a good, strong, big-looking athlete, and it's going to be hard to overpower him physically. I don't see a single guy in this tournament of the Super 6 that physically is as strong or as athletic or putting that combination together quite like the Viking Warrior.
Yeah, I mean, I think the guy, that I'd match him up with that would give him the most trouble is probably going to be Arthur Abraham, who's, is got some speed to him, is very strong, and they're about as economical as each other. That's the thing with Kessler, is he doesn't make a lot of mistakes. He's just 1-2, 1-2. If he has the hook, he'll throw it. Every once in a while, he'll mix in an uppercut. He doesn't go to the body at all, it seems. I think he threw like 3 body shots in the whole fight. But he's not a guy that you're going to catch reaching or, going out of his envelope. You're going to have to bring the fight to him and maybe overpower him with volume like Joe Calzaghe did, kind of moving at angles and confusing him. Because I still think that movement is going to bother him. But, looking at Andre Ward's fight against Shelby Pudwill, who was a guy that, he did exactly what I thought he was going to do, was look like a killer, kind of overpower this bigger guy and blow him out, which he did. I see the hands are kind of low on Ward. He used angles, and he does something beautiful in that he'll be orthodox and be throwing a punch and miss it and switch right into southpaw and land. I think that kind of diversity is going to give Kessler trouble. But that 1-2 and the jab especially, which is almost like some guy's lead right hand, it's going to be a big problem for Ward.
I don't want to harp on this too much because it was so long ago, and it could have been an aberration, but I don't think it really was based on some other events that happened against Darnell Boone. Kenny Cost. Second pro fight of Andre Ward against a guy that was hand-picked, white guy from Minnesota, buzzed him, nearly had him out. The one thing, since that point in time, Goose and Tudor and the rest of that management crew, they have been very, very judicious and careful in moving Andre Ward. And to their credit, I think they've done a fantastic job of nurturing a very athletic amateur boxer and turning him into more and more of a pro. I think Virgil Hunter's done a very nice job there.
Yeah.
But when you take a look at world-class experience, savvy, and all that other stuff, seasoning, I think that all goes to Mikkel Kessler. Here's the way I kind of see it right now at the Oracle, November 21st. I agree with you. I think lateral movement and making Mikkel Kessler move his feet and reset, because he's kind of like a locomotive. They're great when they come down the track. You move 6 inches, they meet you. They miss you. So you're going to have to make Mikkel Kessler reset. But I'm not so sure if he's going to swim in deep waters against Kessler and that jab is coming right down the pipe in his face time and time again.
Yeah.
What happens in rounds 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12? I think he'll be okay in the early rounds. I just don't know about the second half of the fight.
That's going to be the thing. I mean, Kessler, like I said, he's economical as all get out. And Ward is going to have to work twice as hard. He's going to be slipping the jab, constantly watching out for the right hand, changing up tactics. And he's going to be working just doubly hard. And what's he going to be like in that last quarter of the fight where he does seem to tire?
Gabe, my question is this. Would you be in agreement that we know or we believe Kessler can beat Ward? I'm not so sure Ward can hurt Kessler, though.
That's the thing, yeah. I think definitely Kessler can hurt Ward. That 1-2, the way he was able to, we saw Perdomo get tired, and he stepped it up, and then he stepped off to the side off of a jab feint and landed that right hand that opened things up. And I see that happening to Ward. It's very possible he could get hurt, but Ward looked like a killer this weekend, but it was against Shelby Pudwill.
Yeah, Gabe, I tell you what, I'm excited about the Super 6, and I don't think the network Showtime could have asked for a better prelude. There's a little bit of a risk. You never know what could happen. Clash of heads, guy breaks a hand, fan man comes into the ring, breaks the guy's back. A million things can happen. But if you want to set up a fight, you want both guys to look impressive regardless of the opposition. I will say this, mission accomplished.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it was a great like infomercial for these two boxers. And you had, like I said, you had Kessler fighting a guy that was kind of rangy and almost similar to Ward in style, or at least a bit in athleticism. And then you had Ward fighting a big tall white guy, which he's going to be fighting at the Oracle. It was perfect.
So there you have it, round number 2 of the next round, brought to you by Everlast. We come back, we wrap it up with news and notes. And we wrap it up here on the next round, brought to you by Everlast. We head to news and notes, taking a look at the fight review. Saturday in Mexico, Julio Cesar Chavez Jr., the TKO in 1 over Jason LaHoulier. Then Saturday in Puerto Rico, Ivan Calderon. This is deja vu all over again. Technical decision in 6 over Rodel Mayol. While WBO super featherweight title is Rocky Martinez stops Fedor Viloria in 9. I think it's clear, and for full disclosure, we have not seen these fights yet, but I think it's clear. When it comes to Julio Cesar Chavez Jr., it's official, Gabe. he is the Mexican butterbean.
Yeah, pretty much. You know, I mean, I think Shelby Pudwill will actually be fighting Julio Cesar Chavez in a catchweight bout in between this and the John Duddy fight, which is coming up. I mean, at this point, you know, like we were talking about it earlier, you would think that the progression would get tougher. That there would actually be a progression, but it just seems like he's fighting the Matt Vandas and Jason LaHouliers of the world over and over again.
That's our point. If you're saying this is his amateur career, this is developmental stage, well, developmental to me also means that you're upping the level of opposition. I think to me, they're going to get so desperate, they're going to run out of white guys out of the Midwest. They're going to start going for Asian fighters out of the Midwest. And I'm not even so sure those things exist, but I've stopped caring. Yeah. I got to be completely honest with you. Even the John Duddy fight, maybe there might be some intrigue because Duddy can at least bang a little bit with the left hook. Yeah. But I'm sorry, the Latin Fury to me, that has absolutely, it's Arthur Fonzarelli jumping the shark. Yeah. That is absolutely jumping the shark. And when it comes to Latin Fury, I'd much rather watch guys like Juanma Lopez and guys of that ilk. And Ivan Calderon, Rodel Mayol, it does not surprise me that, number one, he won this fight in Puerto Rico. But I think it's clear, if they fought 10 times, I think you'd have a technical decision in 6 rounds. 8 of them. Yeah,
at this point, you know, you just got to put the 2 fights together, and
they put their heads together.
Yeah, and they fought 12. Let's just move on to the next fight. I think the fight to be made is now, you know, Valoria versus Calderon. I think that's the way to go.
That's the biggest little fight there is to make it 108 pounds.
Absolutely.
And it's the newest rivalry in boxing, the Puerto Ricans against the Filipinos, and I think that would be a very intriguing style matchup. Moving on with the fight preview, ESPN2 Friday Night Fight Special Edition. Guillermo Rigondeaux takes on Giovanni Andrade. Then on Showbox, Travis Kaufman, undefeated 18-0 young heavyweight, takes on Tony Grano at 15-1-1. And the always exciting Chris Avalos with the record of 11-0 takes on Will Boxley with the record of 5-1. And then Saturday in Germany for the vacant IBF middleweight title, Sebastian Sylvester takes on Giovanni Lorenzo. Gabe, what I find intriguing about the Rigondeaux-Andrade fight, and I do think that Rigondeaux will win, but when was the last time you saw a kid who was very, very, very experienced from the amateur level? So maybe this is a very built-up 2-0.
Yeah.
When was the last time you saw a guy who didn't have even 4 fights professionally take on a veteran of 71 fights? Andrade is 60-11, one of the old-school tough Mexican journeymen of this generation.
Yeah. What is he, 39 now, something like that? He's getting kind of up there in years, but I've never seen that happen. I mean, but you watch, you know, Rigondeaux in the gym, man, and he looks like a seasoned pro. I mean, he's got feints, he's got all kinds of different moves, he's fast as hell. He just seems intelligent, and that when Roach tells him to do something, he does it. You know, he just is able to integrate it into his game. I think one of the worries they had about him was that he'd had so many amateur fights, like 300-400.
You become programmed.
Yeah, that you're just, you know, stuck that way. But no, he's really progressing, and it says a lot about the confidence they got in him.
The best thing that Rigondeaux did was moving from Miami, Florida, or the South Florida area, Little Havana, all the way out to the other side. You talk to people that have been around the Cuban fighters. They are really, really, I think, vulnerable to the temptations of American lifestyle, a full refrigerator, dance clubs, alcohol. You talk to Joe Goosen,
I like those things
which are great things, except we're not fighters.
But
if you take a look at a guy like Joel Casamayor, he was stagnating out there in Florida until he made the move to Van Nuys to Joe Goosen.
Yeah.
I don't think his career would have been anything like it was if he does not walk into the doors of the 10 Goose boxing gym. I do expect Rigondeaux to pound out a decision or maybe a late stoppage. A stoppage over Andrade, though, even at this stage, is still very, very impressive. Showbox, Travis Kaufman, young undefeated heavyweight at 18-0, has some abilities, good amateur career. I want to see if physically, if he can lose a little weight and start to look a little bit more like an athlete. He does have some tools.
Yeah, you know, he actually has been dropping the weight each fight. You know, he had a long layoff due to some
legal issues. Let's put it like that.
We'll just call it,
you know.
Yeah, legal issues. He blew up to like 300 pounds, something like that. And you know, last fight he got down to like 225. He's actually training at Deer Lake, Muhammad Ali's old training camp, and is you know, kind of hating all the pain that he's going through, but loving the isolation and really focusing in on his career. You know, Grano is kind of a journeyman guy. They're around the same age, and he does have some knockout ability, but he's also been stopped himself. So I think, you know, Kaufman's going to probably pull out the decision. He doesn't have the most power in the world, but he is an exciting guy, and he does throw a lot of punches. You know.
You know, again, just the heavyweight division. You just don't have to be good. Sometimes you just have to be decent and just stick around to make an impression. And Chris Avalos, I don't know if he's ever going to be a world champion. But like a Brandon Rios, he's a fun guy. He's a good TV fighter. Every time you see him, you're going to see some fisticuffs, Gabe.
Oh, yeah, you're always going to see some action. He's a come-forward guy. He's going to throw a lot of punches. He's going to take a lot of punches, too. He's just an all-action TV fighter. It's a good card. It's a good weekend for fights.
And also, Sebastian Sylvester against Giovanni Lorenzo. I've seen Sebastian Sylvester. Pretty good athletic guy, good hand speed, good boxer. I just think he's a better fighter than Giovanni Lorenzo. And the fight's in Germany. I think he wins this fight.
Yeah, I kind of lean towards him. Lorenzo started out his career looking pretty strong, looking like a power-punching guy. I kind of question his power. With Sylvester, he can be outboxed. I mean, he did drop a decision to Felix Sturm, but he does have a KO win over Castillejo. So I'm kind of curious to see, what Lorenzo shows up. Is he going to be the come-forward power puncher that really just is looking to land a big bomb, or is he going to box a little bit? I'm actually kind of leaning towards Lorenzo right now.
Whoa, yeah. That'd be an upset, because he's going on the road here. And the thing about Lorenzo, you talk about his early power. I call that early matchmaking. Yeah. So I think it's one of those listen, the guy lost to a faded older version of Raul Marquez. Yeah. To me, that's kind of a check mark. When Sylvester loses, it's to really good, young, in their prime, world-class opposition at 160. So we have a disagreement there. We wrap it up here with tidbits. Couple of things here. Last week we talked about Shane Mosley, Joshua Clottey on December 26th at the Staples Center. Well, everyone else said yes. HBO said no. So it looks like that situation is in flux. Man. And then this fight has been moved from December 5th to December 12th. Tim Bradley and Lamont Peterson for the WBO junior welterweight title. What's going on here is it looks like HBO, and not that I necessarily disagree with them, they want him to fight Andre Berto in January of 2010, but there's a couple of issues. Berto's people, they're saying, wait a minute, we haven't fought since May 30th against Juan Urango. Why should we hold out that long? Right. And Golden Boy feels like they've been wronged here, and I don't necessarily disagree with them either, Gabe. They were knocked off on December 5th for Williams-Pavlik, which I believe will be finalized this week, and then they were given December 26th, and then the rug was pulled out from under them. Yeah. So right now, HBO and Richard Schaefer, you read my article over the weekend, there's trouble in paradise. This is a high-profile marriage. Well, Brad Pitt now is sleeping on the couch. He's not getting any from Angela Jolie.
Well, he got some, so I'm not going to cry for him. But, Sugar Shane Mosley, man, has turned into the Rodney Dangerfield of boxing. The man gets no love. Now they're going to force him into an even tougher fight than the Clottey fight, and they're going to push him back to next year. But, in a sense,
he did this to himself. The first half of the year was on him.
Yeah, I have to kind of blame him. You can't wait till the last second. It's like, waiting to the last second to go see, a play or something, and you showed up closing night and everything's sold out. Yeah. That's on you, man. Yeah. But in terms of HBO and Golden Boy, well, maybe this marriage should break up. They've been kind of feeding us some bad fights over the years, and maybe, Golden Boy needs to put together better fights more often, and then they'll get all the dates that they want.
But I think it's one of the dangers of wedding yourself to one company.
That's the thing.
Mean, listen, anyone in business does not want just one avenue. You want other avenues to do your business, and let's face it, when it comes to the money that's going to be paid to Shane Mosley and Bernard Hopkins, another issue they have, because they want to bump Bernard off his January 30th date. Well, you kind of painted yourself into this corner, so we'll see where this works out the next couple of weeks. I got to tell you, from a boxing fan standpoint, for the overall health of the game, I've never liked dueling dates on HBO or Showtime. No. I think it splits the audience. I think it's awfully unfair to a lot of people that are involved in the sport of boxing. I'm actually very relieved that December 5th, Pavlik Williams gets his own spotlight, and then Bradley Peterson gets his own spotlight. Because that's a pretty good fight in its own right.
Well, a while back, all the promoters had met, and they were talking about this trade association. Well, when are we going to actually see it? Because you could solve these problems. You could put all these fights on one card, and everybody shares a piece of the pie. The pie becomes bigger, but, then maybe you put all your promotional, powers to be, and you put them out there, and you make a bigger fight. Maybe you go to a bigger venue, look for a bigger site fee at a casino. Find some way to get all these fights together rather than dueling dates, because I don't want to see that anymore.
Yeah, and just looking at the fight itself, I'm going to say this right now. I've heard a lot of things about Peterson giving Mayweather fits, which does not surprise me because he's a smart, well-schooled, technical boxer. Tim Bradley's been on a roll. Let me tell you something. This is a very, very tough fight for the Desert Storm against Lamont Peterson.
I'm leaning towards Peterson right now. I like the pure boxer. He's a younger, more athletic, or he's about the same age, but he's a young, athletic guy in his prime. He's not afraid to stink out the joint. He's got the skills to play the four corners off or defense. I really like him in this fight a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's it for this week's edition of TNR. Brought to you by Everlast on behalf of Gabe Montoya and the rest of Max Boxing. Till the next round. Goodbye, everybody.